reporter. Can you tell me about how this discovery is already being applied, as has been said, and also what other diseases and cancers you can apply it?
Yes. So usually you can use the metaphor at a high altitude view, but in oxygen sensing that sometimes leads to other thoughts. But broadly, what my co-awardees and I identified was a molecular pathway that allows cells to sense oxygen, and depending on how much oxygen they're getting, to respond appropriately by turning on specific genes that, for example, might stimulate red blood cell production or might stimulate blood vessel formation. So there are many diseases characterized by inadequate oxygen delivery, one of which is anemia, but also certain cardiovascular diseases. And so now, for the first time, we have pharmacological tools that can activate this pathway and can trick the body into, for example, thinking you've gone to the top of Mount Everest. So there's a series of orally available drugs that are being tested now where the patient will take the drug, the body thinks it's at high altitude and starts making more red blood cells. And there are literally millions of people around the globe who walk around with low red blood cell counts, anemia being inadequate red blood cells. And in certain parts of the world, transfusing those patients or giving them an expensive hormone such as erythropoietin is not really a viable option. And so perhaps for that reason, the first approval of the first of these drugs took place in China in 2018. Japan just approved it about a month or so ago, and the filing for US approval will take place later this month. So that's drugs that stimulate this response and activate this response that normally would be engaged with low oxygen. On the flip side, we now know that certain cancers, and a particularly notorious one is kidney cancer, which is one of the cancers that the VHL patients also develop. But certain cancers, and in particular kidney cancers, this pathway is co-opted. They've taken the pathway and they're using it for their own evil purposes. But now, because of the work that my fellow awardees and I did, there are other places to intervene with other drugs that will turn the pathway off rather than on. Now, the first wave of those drugs were the so-called VEGF inhibitors that started to get approved for a number of cancers, including, again, kidney cancer. But now we have newer drugs that are targeting the master regulator of this response. Those drugs are a little bit earlier. They look very good in phase 2, and they're about to start phase 3 registration trials. But just as an indication of the enthusiasm around these new drugs, I've been working with a company in Texas called Peloton Therapeutics that was developing one of these new inhibitors of the pathway, and Merck just bought Peloton a couple months ago for over $1 billion. So at least the Mercks of the world think this is part of the future.